families returned to Texas. Children's Home was sort of hard to work with at the time without them being our go-between. And so I asked Armin and I asked Chad, I said, where else might we try working at? We'd like to do maybe a 5-day club or a VBS type thing on our own. And here's where it gets really weird. Chad said, well, I know this guy, Candelario, and he just went down to Parras to be a missionary. Chad and Elise had moved back to Texas. He was trying to get a job as a pastor. He landed a job as a pastor on the Texas side of the valley, and he was working with this guy, Candelario. And he's talking to the caretaker of the outreach center in Parras. He says, hey, this guy Candelario, I think he'd be really good in ministry down there. And he's like, yeah, I know that guy. I worked with him in the valley decades ago. It's just, we do mundane things, and we think that God is not at work the way He is in the miraculous. But every so often, God gets to show us just a little bit of how He's working all the time in all places, working all things together, as Scripture tells us. I just wanted to give you a little view of just how interconnected this has all been in just, we've been going for 6-7 years now. This has been decades in the making. So Candelario was our host, if you will. He hosted a VBS in his home. We had never done a 5-day club or a VBS thing on our own before. And so I approached Michaela and said, would you help? And she said, yeah, that's what I used to do all the time. So she helped us get materials ready. I did translation on paper so we could have scripts to go by and stuff like that. And Candelario said, expect 50 to 70 kids. And this was rather scary to me because we had 2 Spanish speakers. And I didn't know how that was going to play out. But Michaela and I, we decided, well, let's see, if we have 50 to 70 kids, how many decisions do you think there will be? I'd like to give a Bible to each child who makes a decision. So we bought 15. We thought, out of 50 to 70, 15 decisions. That sounds about right. I will pass the mic off to Adam to go from there, I think.
I don't need a mic. Okay, guys. So I'm going to tell you where we picked up. On our way down this year, we had no breakdowns or anything like that. It was actually quite smooth. On our first day of VBS, we had a small crowd. Barely a crowd. I think one less than we could have called a crowd. But we were expecting 50 to 70 children, and we got 9. 9 children plus the Harkis kids and the other boys. So we had a very small crowd. We went ahead as planned. Kyle began the day, I need to get my notes up too. Kyle began the day by telling the story. And what he was doing was reading it in Spanish, because we got Spanish copies of the books that Michaela used to use for her 5-day clubs that she used to do with her parents. Steve is there holding up the book so the children can see the words and the pictures. Then, on the first day, the story was about creation, because, you start from the beginning. And during the week, the VBS basically gives the super produced cliff notes of the Bible. Start with the creation, and then you move all the way through to the importance of church in the end on the fifth day. So in this illustration here, he was making an earth out of just Play-Doh. And then he had some fun with it, and gave another illustration of the way that the world likes to explain evolution and the way everything came to be, just something out of nothing. So he put a big puzzle, I think it was a 500-piece puzzle, into a bag, and he said, I'm going to put this puzzle together. And so we started shaking the bag. Stopped, held it up, hey, can you see a picture? Is the puzzle put together? And all the kids would laugh and say, no, no, no. And so we'd do it again and again and again. And he said, this is what it's like to believe that all of the world came out of nothing. That I can sit here and shake this bag, and eventually all these pieces are going to be turned the right way and fit with the exact correct piece. And he said, that's foolish. I remember that. Anyway, so each of the days had a different theme. My darling wife, Steve and Kyle, and actually this guy here is one of the local pastors. They led music in Spanish. Steve is playing the guitar very skillfully in Spanish, by the way. And I was going to be helping with this part, but I ended up doing another part of the ministry, which is taking pictures of every child, which we'll see in a little bit, and printing them out so that they can put it in a little frame that they make in one of the days of VBS. And it was amazing to see God work through Hannah, as she doesn't speak much Spanish, but she was able to sing the songs in Spanish and lead the children. Let's see. This is the craft time that followed music usually. We didn't go in the same order every day. But the children took a coffee filter and they colored on it. And we told them, you don't have to be real accurate or anything. You don't have to draw any real shapes. Then you spray the coffee filter with water, and those colors kind of melt together. And they make a beautiful, something that kind of resembles the world. You've got blue spots and you've got green spots. And I'll show you a little bit more of that in a little bit. Towards the end of the day, we did game time. This is one where it shows the importance of everybody sticking together and working together. You have to take the hula hoop and you have to move it all the way around the circle without letting go of your hands. So you have to step into it, move it over your head, and then step out of it again and move it to the next person. It's a hilarious game to watch with little people and big people. And then we were supposed to have a video here that showed this is one of our technical difficulties, a nice little movie with all the children's pictures and their names and their ages, but it didn't work the way I thought it was going to. So these are each of the children. And that's actually the lady that takes care of the children's home that we started working in. She made it into our slide somehow. And we visited her this year, as we do every year, and just try to encourage her a little bit. We got to see the fruits of last year's, I almost didn't mention that. We saw a result of last year's ministry, which was tearing down a roof. In her quarters, she had a horribly disheveled roof. I don't know if you guys remember the dusty pictures and all of that, but this year we got back and she said, I have to show you guys what we did with the money that you guys donated after you demolished the roof. We walked into her bedroom and we were literally floored. My mouth dropped open. I'm sure other people's did. It was absolutely gorgeous. They had these beautiful brand new tiles that looked like wood grain on the floor. The roof was nice and it didn't leak. back to this year's ministry. These are the children that came to Vacation Bible School. We started with 9 children, and at the end of the week, we had 22. So we more than doubled. And out of those 22 children, 15 of these, which were going to be in another movie holding their nice little Bibles, 15 of them actually accepted Christ. There were 2, that's 15 out of 22 in 1 week. Much better return on investment, I guess, than we expected. We were expecting 15 out of 50 to 70. We were just a little away by that. There were 2 more children that we definitely need to be praying for. We're not sure if they professed to accept Christ that day because so many of the other children were doing it. Some of their peers, their kids their age were doing it. But they were going to talk, Candelario was going to talk with them and make sure that it was sincere. This girl, her name is Sabina. No, that's not Sabina. That's not her either. There we go. This little girl, precious child, she was at another VBS that we did 4 years ago. And so she has been touched by this church twice now, directly, by our mission team that goes down there every year for the past 7 years. So it's amazing to see her 4 years older and recognize her and realize that she's still being touched by the local church. She's being touched by our church 1,400 miles away, something like that. The rest of these children, most of which, remember, most of these accepted Christ. We know that one. Okay, so on Thursday, this is the day when the gospel was presented, and the children were presented with the decision whether to follow Christ or not. That's our 22-child day, or 20-child day. We had a couple of extras on the last day. And let's see if I missed anything. I put my notes down and never looked at them again. We had started we started out at Candelario's house to do the VBS. And the first day of VBS, earlier in the day, about noon, we went out and we walked around to the neighborhood around his house. And we handed out little flyers saying, hey, come to our VBS later this day. It was just a simple piece of paper cut in half. It had the Butler Leonard wine on the page, which church was running it. Very simple. We make things too complex here. When the time came for VBS to start, Candelario got in his van, and he drove around to the several different neighborhoods and picked up children to which he was already ministering. So not only did we try to reach those that were not being ministered to, but we went and picked up children like we would here. We picked up children that were already in their church or being ministered to by him and his family at the time. That was one of the most encouraging things about this. He was invested in these children before we got there. This wasn't just some random pick a spot on the map, go to a VBS there, leave, and have no follow-up. As we've been frustrated with in the past. We would go down, we'd do a VBS or do an outreach, and we would contact them later, contact missionaries later, and we could ask them, where are these kids? What are they doing for Christ and whatnot? And they would say, we don't know. We're guilty of doing that here in our church. We're guilty of doing that in Mexico as a body of believers. That should assured us that he had all the children's names, and knew where every one of them lived, except for one little boy that just ended up dead the last couple of days. And he was going to be following up with every one of them. He was going to make sure that they were discipled, and that they had a church home, and that they were loved. And so we left with a massive amount of hope, because what we did was not in vain. What he's doing was not in vain. Our trip down there was a great encouragement to him, his family, and the churches that were involved in this. I think we had 3 different ministries, 3 different local ministries that were involved in the VBS. We had 2 different churches, and we had Candelario's Mission, which could be considered a 3rd church, all involved in this. And then we had our church. So really that's 4 different ministries that were involved in this one VBS. Let's see. So now we're going to move on to closing with a clause with the Megan Harkis.
Okay, so I know I'm talking about quilts, and Kyle also said to share anything else, any other thoughts I had about the trip. So the quilts are a little easier to talk about, and I wrote notes on